The city skyline shimmered beneath a silver moon, the towers of glass and steel reflecting back the quiet promise of the night. Atop the highest tower, the Chase Tech building pierced the clouds like a monument to ambition. It was a place of endless movement, where people rushed through revolving doors chasing deals, deadlines, and the next step up the corporate ladder. By day, it roared with life. By night, it was silent. Except for her. Martha Daniels moved quietly, the wheels of her mop bucket squeaking softly across the marble floors of the top executive level. Her steps were slow but steady, practiced. She wore a faded gray uniform with a navy blue name tag clipped over her heart. No one ever read it. She'd been cleaning this floor for nearly 9 years. Most of the young men in suits didn't even nod in her direction as they passed. She was as much a fixture as the plants in the corner or the art on the wall. But tonight was different. It was nearly 11 p.m. when the elevator dinged and opened, spilling warm light across the floor. Martha looked up, expecting to see a forgetful intern grabbing a laptop or an assistant retrieving a file. Instead, it was Brandon Chase himself. Tall, striking, impeccably dressed in a black tailored suit, he looked like he belonged on the cover of every magazine. He was the kind of man who could change someone's life with a glance, or ruin it with a word. He hadn't noticed her at first. He walked straight across the gleaming floor, tossing a file down on the conference table with a sharp thud. He ran a hand through his hair and sighed, pacing. Martha continued cleaning quietly, but her eyes watched him from the reflection on the glass wall. He looked stressed, frustrated, a man used to winning who had just been told no. As she pushed the mop forward, the sound made him turn. That's when he saw her. She expected the usual disinterested glance. Instead, his eyes narrowed with mild curiosity. He gave a half laugh, the kind that hinted at sarcasm. "You know," he said, walking closer. "For someone your age, you move pretty well. You look light on your feet." Martha said nothing. He grinned, folding his arms. "Go on then," he said, in a tone somewhere between a tease and a challenge. "Dance." The silence that followed was thick. Martha stopped moving. Her hand still clutched the mop. She turned slowly to face him, eyes meeting his. Her face was lined with time, her silver hair pulled neatly into a low bun. But her eyes, those eyes, held something ancient and powerful. Something he didn't understand. She didn't say a word. She stepped back from the mop and took a deep breath. Then, with a grace that defied her age and the setting, she began to move. She raised her arms with the fluid precision of a swan taking flight. Her feet slid softly across the marble, every step a whisper. Then she turned, spun once, twice, and landed with a silent glide that drew the air from the room. There was no music, but it didn't matter. Her body told a story older than words. Brandon stared. She moved with the fluidity of silk, the strength of someone who had trained her body for decades to obey. Her back was straight, her form impeccable. Even now, past her prime and well into her 60s, there was something regal about her posture. She didn't stumble, didn't pause for effect. She danced like she had done it 1,000 times, and still loved it. She finished with a soft pirouette and a small bow. Then she picked up the mop, turned, and continued cleaning as if nothing had happened. Brandon was frozen. "What the hell?" he muttered under his breath. He followed her, his footsteps echoing in the stillness. "Wait, hold on. What was that?" Martha looked over her shoulder. "Dancing," she said, plainly. "No, I mean, that wasn't normal. You don't just move like that. Where did you learn?" She didn't answer, just smiled faintly and kept mopping. Brandon stood there for several moments, stunned, before walking back to his office. He sat down in his leather chair, but his mind refused to focus. His computer screen blinked back at him, but the words blurred. All he could see was her, spinning, gliding, bowing. He pressed the intercom. "Angela," he said to his assistant, who had long gone home but would hear the message in the morning. "I want the personnel file on the cleaning crew. Especially the older lady on the executive floor. First thing tomorrow." By noon the next day, he had it in his hands. He flipped through the records quickly until he found it. Martha Jean Daniels. Born 1957. Widow. No children. Employed with clean serve janitorial services since 2014. Before that, there were gaps, years unaccounted for. He dug deeper. An old article came up. Martha Daniels crowned prima ballerina at the National Ballet. A photo of a much younger woman in a flowing costume, mid-leap, graced the page. She looked like she was flying. His eyes widened as he read more. She had performed all over Europe and Asia. She was a gold medalist in international ballet competitions. Her name had been etched in programs and posters in major cities. Then in 1993, a devastating ankle injury during rehearsal had ended her career. Doctors had told her she'd never dance again. She disappeared from the spotlight. No further news. No biography. No interviews. Just gone. And now, she cleaned his floors. That night, he waited. When she entered the top floor pushing her mop bucket as usual, he was already there. He had ordered food, tea, even classical music was playing low on the sound system. She gave him a look. "Why are you here again?" she asked. "I wanted to apologize," he said, standing. "I didn't know who you were." "I still am," she replied simply. "I mean, what you used to be." "I didn't used to be. I still am. I just don't wear costumes anymore." He smiled, unsure how to respond. "Can we talk?" he asked. "I have questions." She sighed but sat down across from him at the small table near the window. He leaned forward. "Why are you working here?" Martha looked out the window, her voice calm. "Because a standing ovation doesn't pay the bills. Because after your name fades from the posters, the world forgets. Because an injury doesn't stop time, but it stops everything else. I gave my life to the stage. When it left me, I had nothing left but my hands. So I used them." Brandon swallowed hard. "You should have had more." "Should've, could've, didn't," she said with a shrug. "I'm not bitter. I'm still alive. That's enough. But you were brilliant. And now I'm invisible. That's the way of things. It's not just dancers. It's teachers, nurses, factory workers. People give their best, and then life moves on without applause." He was quiet. "I mocked you," he said. "I was arrogant." "Yes," she agreed. "But not beyond learning." He laughed softly, then looked at her. "Would you teach me?" Martha raised an eyebrow. "Teach you to mop?" "No. To dance." She tilted her head. "You're serious?" He nodded. "I've never seen something so free. Powerful. I want to understand it." She chuckled. "You don't have the feet for ballet. Then teach me the soul of it." Her eyes met his. For the first time, she saw him not as the CEO, not as the man in the suit, but as a boy trying to touch something he couldn't name. She nodded. "Okay then. But don't expect applause." "I won't," he said. "I just want to feel what you feel." As the city lights twinkled outside, they stood together, he tall and unsure, she graceful and calm. She showed him how to stand, how to hold his arms, how to move without force. It was awkward at first. He stumbled, laughed, apologized. But she didn't laugh at him. She corrected gently, praised softly. And for the first time in years, Martha Daniels didn't feel invisible. And Brandon Chase didn't feel untouchable. They were just two souls in a quiet room, bound by a single truth: movement can heal. Dance can speak when words fail. And sometimes, a joke becomes the doorway to rediscovering something beautiful. That night didn't end with a performance or a curtain call. It ended with a thank you. And for Martha, that meant more than applause ever did. Would you like to continue with part 2 in a similar tone and length? Brandon Chase had always lived in control. Control of his time, his company, his image. Everything around him bowed to his pace and precision. From a young age, he had been taught to climb, to compete, to dominate every boardroom, every negotiation. People admired his power, feared his decisions, and chased his approval like it was currency. But that night with Martha had cracked something in him. It started subtly. After their first session, he found himself thinking about posture when standing during meetings, keeping his shoulders back the way she'd shown him, relaxing tension in his jaw before important calls. He started walking differently, not with arrogance but with presence. People noticed, though no one could quite put a finger on what had changed. He began staying late, not to grind through spreadsheets or make last-minute calls to Tokyo, but to meet with her in the empty corridors of the top floor. They danced without music most nights. Sometimes he played soft classical on his phone. Sometimes, it was only silence and the rhythm of their movements. Brandon wasn't a natural by any means. He stumbled, overextended, misaligned his steps, but Martha was patient, even when he cursed under his breath or lost his balance. "Let go of your ego," she would say, pressing his shoulder lightly. "Dance doesn't care how important you are. It only listens to your truth." He didn't know what that meant, not at first. But he kept coming back. Night after night, after the city quieted and the workers disappeared. And in that silence, he began to listen differently, to himself, to her, and to the soundless music of memory that seemed to live in Martha's very bones. Over time, their conversations deepened. Martha opened up in pieces, like the slow unraveling of an old ribbon. She spoke of stages in Paris and Vienna, of rehearsals that pushed her body to the edge, of standing ovations that made her heart pound louder than the music. She had loved dancing with a passion that had no language, until the injury. One slip during a lift, one wrong landing. A tendon snapped, and with it, the future she'd built vanished. Doctors had tried to repair her body. No one tried to repair her spirit. "It was like watching my soul drift out of my reach," she said once, seated on the window ledge, her mop resting beside her. "I tried to cling to it. But the stage moved on. New stars. New names. People forget. And when they forget, it's like you never existed." Brandon looked at her in the pale glow of the city and thought, "She's still more alive than half the people I know." "You didn't deserve to be forgotten," he said. She smiled sadly. "No one does. But that's life." He thought about the world he lived in, where names on a company roster changed every quarter, where even senior executives were disposable if they missed projections, where no one asked about the janitor, where kindness was secondary to profit. He had shaped that world. He'd helped build it. Now he wasn't sure he wanted to live in it. One evening, Brandon surprised her. When she arrived, the top floor had been cleared. Desks pushed back. Lights dimmed to a soft amber glow. He'd rented a small speaker and connected it to a playlist, her old performances, reconstructed from fragments he'd found online. Classical pieces that once accompanied her movements on world stages. She stood in the middle of the open space, looking around, unsure. "This is for you," he said. She blinked. I don't perform anymore," she said quietly. "It's not a performance," he replied. "Just a moment. Your moment." She hesitated. Her hands trembled. And then, something settled in her. She moved to the center of the room, closed her eyes, and waited for the music to begin. When it did, she breathed in. Then she danced. Brandon had seen her before, of course, but this was different. She wasn't dancing to prove anything, or to impress anyone. She was simply releasing herself, years of silence, pain, and longing melting into motion. Her movements were slower now, more restrained than in her prime, but they carried a depth that time had only enriched. Every step was filled with meaning. Every gesture told a story. He felt something tighten in his throat as he watched. It wasn't sadness, it was reverence. She finished to silence, and Brandon clapped, not loudly, but with sincerity. Martha turned, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" he asked. "For seeing me." After that night, something between them changed. There was still a teacher and a student dynamic, but also a quiet understanding. A bond. Brandon began visiting her outside of work. He brought her books on dance, DVDs of ballets she once performed in, vintage posters he hunted down through collectors. She resisted at first, claiming she didn't need charity, but he reminded her gently, "This isn't charity. This is honor." He learned she lived in a modest apartment in a forgotten corner of the city. Her furniture was old, her television outdated, but everything was neat and warm. Photographs of her late husband and a few old newspaper clippings from her ballet days adorned the mantel. "Do you miss the stage?" he asked her once, sitting in her kitchen with a cup of chamomile tea. "I miss being needed," she said. I miss the way the world held its breath when I moved. Well, he said, you've got me holding mine. She laughed, a sound like wind chimes in the spring. Soon, others started noticing the shift in Brandon. He smiled more. He listened when people spoke. He approved projects that focused on community outreach and arts programs, things he once dismissed as non-essential. His assistant Angela caught him staring at an old ballet performance during lunch break and raised an eyebrow. He just waved her off with a grin. The board of directors whispered. Some thought he was losing his edge. Some worried. But the company flourished under his new vision, because it was driven by something deeper than profit. It was driven by soul. One afternoon, Brandon walked into Martha's janitorial office holding a sleek tablet. "What's this?" she asked. "I want to show you something." He tapped the screen. A video began. It was a montage, images of her from the past, blended with footage he had taken of her dancing recently. Overlaid with soft music, her story unfolded, from young prodigy to celebrated dancer to quiet janitor who never lost her spark. At the end, the screen faded to a logo, the Daniels Foundation for Dance and Healing. She looked at him, confused. "I'm starting a foundation in your name," he said. "To fund ballet scholarships. To support dancers who've suffered injuries. To teach ballet in underserved schools. To remind people that forgotten doesn't mean gone." Her hand covered her mouth. "No one's ever done something like this for me. They will now," he said. "Your story deserves a stage again." She looked down, her eyes filling. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll be the face of it. Say you'll teach, mentor, speak to students, dance, if you want to." Her hand dropped from her mouth. She looked him in the eyes, and for the first time, he saw her as she once was, powerful, poised, breathtaking. "I will," she said. "But only if you keep dancing too." He laughed. "Deal." The foundation launch was small at first. A press release. A soft media campaign. A few interviews. But word spread. Clips of Martha dancing in the Chase Tech office went viral. People were stunned. Former ballet icon found cleaning floors, made headlines. And yet, the narrative wasn't pity, it was inspiration. She was invited to speak at universities. Ballet schools requested masterclasses. Young dancers wrote her letters saying how her story gave them hope. She didn't want fame again. But she welcomed the purpose. Brandon watched all of it unfold with quiet pride. His own life felt fuller. Not because he had added more zeros to his bank account, but because he had helped someone else rediscover their worth, and in doing so, discovered his own. Late one night, months after that first accidental dance, they found themselves again on the top floor. The foundation was thriving. Her name was known again. And yet, she still came to clean once a week. Not because she needed the money, but because the quietness reminded her of who she was. "You know," Brandon said, stretching out his arms clumsily in first position, "I think I've finally figured out what you meant." She arched an eyebrow. "About what?" "That dance listens to your truth." "Oh," she said, amused. "And what is your truth?" "That I spent most of my life trying to be seen, when the real power is seeing others." She smiled, deeply moved. "Well," she said, taking his hand, "shall we dance then, Mr. Chase?" And so they did. Not for show. Not for an audience. Just two souls who had found rhythm, redemption, and something like love in the echoes of silence.